I guess we can go ahead and get started here. Today, we are going to have a conversation with Justin McSheehy from Pure Portworx, who's responsible for Global Portworx Partner Account Management Team. And he is joined by Insight's distinguished technologist, Dean Shyla, to discuss their perspectives on the best approaches to accelerate application modernization. My name is Drew Forsberg. I'm a business development manager for Pure Storage here at Insight, and I'm one of many people helping develop this partnership so we can deliver greater value to our mutual customers. Can get the next slide. Whether you're already familiar with Insight or not, I just wanted to showcase this timeline of how Insight has evolved as a company, both organically and through acquisitions, going from a more typical reseller in many years past to being more focused on services and solutions today. We've expanded into the DevOps and cloud space with our acquisitions of Blue Metal and Cardinal a few years back, and that's where a lot of our talent around OpenShift resides today. In addition, we beefed up our data center infrastructure capabilities when we acquired Datalink in 2017, which is where a lot of our automation capabilities reside today. Insight's most recent acquisition of SATA and InfoCenter bring best-in-class capabilities around Google Cloud and ServiceNow, respectively. Next slide, please. When we look at how Insight works with solutions such as OpenShift and Portworx, I want to quickly touch on why Insight should be considered your go-to partner for both Red Hat and Pure Storage. We support both these businesses today with a couple of dozen pre and post-sales engineers across a number of technical teams. Insight has the highest available credentials among Pure partners as not only an elite partner, but we also carry the ASP service provider designation, so we are able to offer first and second line support for Pure Storage as well as many other manufacturers. We are awarded Pure's 2024 Trailblazer Partner of the Year Award, and we are the first North American partner to be granted access to Remote Connect and Edge services to better support Pure environments with our one-call support program. Insight has the ability and expertise to support our clients with their Red Hat and Pure Portworx solutions, both on-prem and in the cloud. And so it is notable that we maintain great relationships with major hyperscalers, Microsoft Azure, AWS, and GCP as well. So you can be comfortable and confident that we can help you with your Pure Portworx needs all throughout your journey from on-prem and through the cloud. All right, with that, let me pass it over to Justin and Dean. Gentlemen, take it away.
Great, thank you, Drew. Dean, good talking to you here today. I think this is one of the hottest topics we've seen all year on our side is, customers that are running on VMware that are looking for potential alternatives. So great to chat with you, and just curious, what has the feedback been on the Insight side from your customers today?
Yeah, it's been an interesting landscape. And by the way, thanks, Drew, and hello, Justin. So from our side, it's been interesting because we went through a long period of kind of a stable technology, right? VMware was in the mix. You could rely on their regular updates. You could rely on Intel with their Tic-Tac processor updates. So what we did over the last year, over really late 2023 and all of 2024, is that's all kind of been thrown into, I guess we can just call it what it is. It's been a bit chaotic. But with chaos like this comes opportunity. I think a lot of our customers are looking at this as an opportunity to modernize their platforms. When you have a shift in technology like this, you realize that you've probably accumulated some tech debt over a number of years if you've been running your infrastructure the same way for a number of years. So it's really a fresh look at infrastructure and application platforms and organizationally how things are getting done. So that's what we've kind of seen over the last year.
Great. Yeah. Why don't we, I would say, why don't we go to the next slide and then we can talk about. So Dean, how do you think in terms of the marketplace today, the major events that kind of got us to where we are? Because I think right now Kubernetes is looked at as a more viable option more than ever, especially in the enterprise market space. And now it's even looked at as an option for customers that want to run virtual machines. So maybe you can talk us through a little bit some of the marketscape on how we got here.
Sure. Well, first of all, I guess I would just bring up a fact. Did you know that Kubernetes turned 10 years old this year?
I did know that. Exactly.
It was
Yes.
released. It was an internal Google project, and then was released as open source in June 2014. So I think if you look at the way the technology has developed, the way it's been embraced by the developer community, I don't think that there's any argument anymore that Kubernetes is an enterprise grade technology. So, like you said, we're seeing this both as a application platform and as a virtual machine platform, although with a couple of caveats. From a virtual machine standpoint, that part of Kubernetes is a little bit more of a recent development. It requires a little bit of help from the platform side, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that Portworx provides. But as you look at the journey that our customers are going on, if you're modernizing an environment, it's a great interim step.
Agreed, agreed. And I think for those that haven't dove into the Kubernetes landscape too heavily yet, a huge part of this was KubeVirt, specifically here, which you see on the right, which, in our opinion, was the missing link. It used to be customers were either all in on containers or all in on VMs, one or the other. KubeVirt allows you to bring VMs into container platforms like OpenShift and run them side by side. And so what that really unlocks customers to do is to migrate VMs on day one and then start to containerize them at their own pace, which I think is, that's always been one of the biggest barriers to entry.
Yeah, and just for another point of reference, so I was rereading a Portworx study. You guys commissioned this with the CNCF Cloud Native Computing Foundation over the summer, and kind of the headline number is that out of the 500 customers that were included in the survey, 80% of them are developing most or all new applications on Kubernetes. Now, there's still, you need room to get to that place, right? It's not something that you can just turn on and expect that you're going to use right away. So having KubeVirt in the mix that allows you to move over to the Kubernetes control plane is a great step in that journey.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I think we can do the next slide and look at some of the paths that are here. So for customers today that are running on VMware, especially from a pure overall platform perspective, we give our clients a lot of different options. And we understand that, there's different workloads that are going to be the right fit dependent upon the client and the application that they're running. And so the way we kind of see it is that we divvy it up into these 4 paths, which is, option number 1 is you don't have to move. You can stay with VMware and you can stay on that existing stack. Pure storage and flash array.
You're gonna pay a little more.
You're gonna pay a little more, yes, yes. But depending on what the applications are and what your outcomes you're looking for, it can be the best option. And so that's where like flash array and then our ability to make sure that you're optimizing the licensing is a huge feature. And even in the pure dashboard, we have tools that will help you diagnose your VMware stack and then look for anywhere that maybe you're underutilized on your VMware licensing. I guess from your standpoint, Dean, how are you guys kind of walking your clients through these different options here? And, how many people do you think are going to stay versus those that are going to explore alternatives?
It's a little bit, we haven't been able to quantify it yet. What we are seeing is a lot of optimization of our customers' VMware platforms, right? They're okay with doing a renewal for now, but as an interim step, and they just want to optimize, number of cores and make sure that they're optimizing that reinvestment. At the same time, many of them are doing evaluations of other virtualization providers. Now, if you notice, like 2 out of 3 options there are hyperconverged options. They're HCI stacks. So customers that have investments in traditional 3-tier architecture, may want to stay with that for certain functionality like snapshots, data reduction, whatever. That can be kind of a heavy lift, but this is also kind of the chaos that I was referring to earlier. There's just a lot of choices. Everyone's trying to, get in on this game and be like the destination. I think our position is there's probably not going to be any one destination. So third option for the cloud, that's another, we do work quite a bit with hyperscalers. That's another option, either through something like AVS, Azure VMware Services, Azure VMware and AWS all have either VMware native or their own platforms to be a destination for a VM migration. So, but then the last one, we are seeing a lot of customers that are taking this as an opportunity to modernize and look at a modern platform. So that entails moving VMs over, moving them into the Kubernetes control plane, and then going forward in those environments. Like it says on the bottom, it's really a platform for the future and gives you the most flexibility for VMs and for applications.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think, option number 4 here too is the most exciting for customers to contemplate and look at, because what we'll see too is, a lot of folks have used Kubernetes, but probably in like more of a dev and test environment or for smaller applications, but there's some familiarity with it in-house. And it's always been on the strategy of converting to it at some point. And now, with this new restructuring that's happened with VMware, a lot of people are saying, well, maybe that time has inched up sooner rather than later. And so looking at those options, especially with OpenShift and Portworx and KubeVirt all mixed in there, can be very appealing. And so I agree with you too, though, that it's not, and that's what we'll get into in just a second, is that it doesn't have to be a big bang migration where everything moves over, right? You can do a diagnosis and then some things can stay on VMware as is, but there's probably a footprint that is a great choice to move over into this new workload and then to build upon from there.
And by the way, before we move off the slide, just wanted to make the point that when it says platform for the future, that also includes running in a hybrid environment. So you can run partially in the cloud if you want to, and being able to do things like stretch the data plane with Portworx. It's a great option for sort of avoiding like cloud lock-in, but still being able to operate in a hybrid environment.
Great. Next slide. So when looking at some of the benefits of running VMs on top of Kubernetes and going down that fourth path there, I think the 3 that are highlighted here is, one is that migration that we touched on, right? This is for the first time ever, you can just bring virtual machines into Kubernetes without having to refactor them as containers from day one. And so that is a huge uplift there. Number 2 is that it allows you to modernize, right? So now that you're in this environment, OpenShift can manage both your VMs and your containers at the same time. And so as you start to refactor or modernize some of those applications, you don't have to have a separate infrastructure, which is bringing us to this unified management. Part of that technical debt, right, is a lot of times people would run Kubernetes in a separate stack with a separate engineering team, and VMware on its own infrastructure with its own engineering team. This gives companies the ability to start to blend those two together to make sure that you have better cost efficiency there. And so I think, when we're talking about how to modernize for the future and build that platform, these are 3 major bullet points that definitely check the pro column for using something like OpenShift and Portworx.
So this shift has also enabled customers to really take a look at how they are structured organizationally, and changing changing their teams, changing how they do things to move more towards a modern platform.
Next slide. So Dean, I'm really curious on your perspective here, because one thing we'll say is, we are not a services company. We create Portworx. It's an ISV type of product. Pure creates the hardware side. So we need a partner with the skill set to help a lot of these customers go from A to Z. And so I think when you were to lay out a path for a customer, what are your recommendations that they should do when looking at, okay, well, I'm on VMware now. How do I adopt this and make sure it's successful so that we continue adopting it and not something that we just run back from because the deployment failed?
Yep. So when you look at these stages here, where we usually start is we have a services offerings that use some internal tools that we've developed that are proprietary to Insight. But we always start with an application dependency mapping, right? And that's a combination of technology and services. It includes interviews with application owners, business owners, really understanding the customers where they are from an application standpoint. So starting with stage one, I mean, there are applications that are out there that we can identify, that we might identify, and we'll do the interviews and no one knows what the application is or what it does, and it doesn't have any dependencies. So that's an easy choice. Just retire it. Why are you still running it? Somebody just forgot to turn it off. But then once we have a really clear picture of the application dependencies, that's when you get to stages 2, 3, and 4, right? It allows you to look at the applications holistically and then decide what's the best platform for this. For example, if you want to do a lift and shift and rehost, maybe an application is going to retire over the next year. Why would you refactor it and spend the effort to move that application to a new platform? That's a perfect application for just moving this over to running VMs in containers and using OpenShift as a platform for that. But then refactoring and creating that new, again, goes back to once you understand what the business is using the applications for, and you can optimize there too. So that's generally how we approach projects like this.
Same thing from our side too. So I think the assessment up front is very critical, identifying the workloads that are going to be successful from day one, and then mapping out that future state path. What we're talking about here is a multi-product solution where VMware had everything under one house with all of their licensing. Now we're talking about OpenShift plus Portworx. And the reason that we're doing that, especially for those that have not run a lot of enterprise workloads in Kubernetes before, is specifically around the data and how Kubernetes handles the tracking and the resiliency of things like databases or stateful applications on there. So from your perspective, Dean, how do you guys look at Portworx to help customers that are running on top of OpenShift today, as a valuable tool to insert into that mix?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a valuable tool in the data plane. And when you're running enterprise applications kind of in the new world of Kubernetes, there's still things from the enterprise side that you expect. Backup, being able to have data across multiple locations, things like that. So Portworx is an important tool in the toolbox that gives our customers the enterprise level capabilities that they've expected this whole time.
So why don't we unpack that a little bit? So from a Portworx standpoint, what we help customers do are run some of these applications that you're seeing here within Kubernetes. So you see applications like MySQL, Cassandra, Postgres, Redis. These are all stateful applications that are going to require you to maintain data, and you're going to want to make sure that if there's a failure on a node somewhere, that you have copies of these, that there's backups that you can restore from, that there's another node you could fail over to, or in a disaster recovery environment. And so those are the capabilities that Portworx addresses kind of at the top level. And as we go ahead and you can build the slide here. The value that Portworx brings into our customers is that we help them automate, protect, and unify all of those applications. So you can run on top of any Kubernetes distribution. You can also run on top of any storage device. So as long as it's a block storage device, Portworx can layer directly into it. And so that allows customers to use storage that's on their local servers, so their local NVMEs. You could be running in the cloud, or you could be using an enterprise storage device. Portworx is just going to take all of that data and pull it virtually into Kubernetes. And so when you have that type of capability for containers, it allows you to designate which ones are going to need a certain level of resiliency, maybe a synchronous disaster recovery, or what applications need to have backup. And it all done at a self-service from the developer plane who's using Kubernetes. So that great efficiency there. The big shift though with KubeVirt is that now that functionality can be extended to the VMs as well because they're wrapped in these containers. And so that's where Portworx is starting to mimic some of the capabilities that you had on VMware, like that live migration. So if a node fails over, the VMs are failing over as well. So that's why, when customers are looking at the Kubernetes alternatives, it's the OpenShift plus Portworx combination that's really kind of checking a lot of those boxes. From a third-party standpoint, one thing that's great to see here is that this market is maturing, and IDC, for the first time ever in 2023, created the Worldwide Container Data Management Plane. And we're happy to say that Pure Storage took that pole spot here, and that's really backed by the Portworx product. And so what this is, though, is a testament to the fact that a lot of enterprises are now looking at what are my storage solutions to run stateful applications in Kubernetes. It's no longer a project like it might have been 10 years ago when Portworx started. Nowadays, 10 years later, this is very much an enterprise practice across the board.
Yeah, and this is really like the blending of the two worlds, right? Because the applications that ran on traditional application stacks were stateful, right? They always had to be there. We were concerned about, where they lived, what infrastructure they were running on. They had to be there. They had to be backed up, and they were always running. The Kubernetes is 180 degrees from that, right? It's designed to be ephemeral. Workloads are designed to if something breaks, just discard it and fire up a new instance. So one of the things that kind of had to evolve is, what do you do with stateful applications and stateful workloads? I mean, databases are going to exist. The data has to live somewhere. Data is not ephemeral. Data is permanent. So having Portworx in the control plane or in the data plane really, gives you the, like I was mentioning before, the enterprise class data plane management that allows you to run stateful applications.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have a lot of conversations with customers, and maybe they're architecting on a cloud provider and they're using something like RDS. So they'll say that their application's ephemeral and running in containers, but all the data is locked into RDS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you port that off, or how do you run it on-prem when RDS doesn't exist in your on-prem environment? Now you're going to have to re-architect and build a new solution down there. And that's where, if you have Portworx, it integrates with either one. So it's the exact same data plane across any of those workloads. And now we're making the database part of the Kubernetes container. All the data, all the entire application becomes portable. So especially for large enterprises that are running in a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment, or maybe have different flavors of Kubernetes that they're running, Portworx is the only option they can look at to get all of those different capabilities everywhere that they are deployed. And to highlight here, so now we're starting to dive into some of the specific features that Portworx helps our customers with when they're running VMs on containers. And I think the top two here are really on the left-hand side, and it's the support for live migration and that VM high availability, aka the vMotion-like functionality that everyone is used to. And so that's what Portworx solves is, we do that blocking and tackling of some of the basic aspects that VMware provided to customers, but we bring that to OpenShift virtualization. And so now when you're running those VMs inside of OpenShift, you have some of those key features that you require to run those applications there, and it makes it a viable option. So, moving forward from there, we do things like day 2 operations. Portworx can also help with the automated capacity management. So you don't have to right size your volumes. Portworx can expand them as your storage grows. And then entering on the far right, some of those very high-end enterprise capabilities. If you need synchronous disaster recovery, I want to fail over between AZs and not lose a second's worth of data, we can stretch that cluster out on the back end, or an asynchronous if it doesn't need to have that same type of SLA around RTOs and RPOs. So a lot of functionality that are on here that customers are looking for in their new solutions are things that we can bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, this is all important functionality. One of the advantages that VMware had is, I mean, they developed their platform over almost 20 years. So being able to do things like, vMotion, high availability, doing the data replication, like those are table stakes. And it's kind of a barrier when a lot of customers are evaluating alternative platforms for VMs. It's like, what do you mean I can't do vMotion? Well, now you can.
And so to kind of wrap it up here, I think this is a nice visual that shows the new modern infrastructure where we have an underlying modern stack that is managing both containers and VMs in that same footprint. And so, from our perspective, we really feel like this is the end state that a lot of customers are going to, start to transition into over the next 2 to 3 years here as they're evaluating some of their different options. And it really provides that cost efficiency for one, but then it's that accelerating time to revenue. I think the most attractive thing about Kubernetes is that customers that fully embrace it, they're just updating their applications faster, which means that they're getting new features to the market, creating new revenue streams for them. So this type of environment, it allows you to handle your workloads of today and then also start to build your workloads of tomorrow without having to, double the cost of managing that infrastructure.
Yeah, I know the headline says modern application development platform, but I would shorten that and just say modern platform. This is really optimized both from an application standpoint and, just being able to run a combination of legacy VMs, legacy workloads while transitioning to a modern application stack, being able to run it all under one control plane, with modern observability tools, things like that. It's really it's a good place to be.
Great. So I think that wraps up the talk today, Dean. From a next step standpoint, if there's any customers out there that want to start this transition and this journey, what would you recommend that they do, and how do they engage with Insight?
Yep, we can start with starting with the email alias that's up on the screen here. That'll go to Drew, and he will route it to the appropriate resources internally. We have teams that cover infrastructure, application, modern platforms, so we can really provide an end-to-end solution, not just on the infrastructure side, but also on the application modernization side.
Excellent. Well, this was a great conversation. I always appreciate talking to you. I feel like I learn a lot every time.
Yes,
So
same here. Drew,
we'll have
thanks for setting this up.
Thank you, guys.